Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial, and today we're going to talk about the time the battleship sunk an island. Right off the bat, a little bit clickbaity, that's not 100% accurate, but that is how it was reported. In fact, we've been told multiple times that there is an article out there that is headlined Battleship Sinks Island. Now, we've never actually seen that article, but in the description below there's a link to a New York Times article from when the ship was reactivated in the 80s that cites an earlier article by that name. So I'm still looking to find that particular article. Heck, we might even have it. We've got thousands and thousands of newspapers in the collection, and honestly, things like that are a really low priority for us to catalog. This is something that was reported, so we're going to talk about the incidents there and what that meant. Before we get to that, today we are in the Combat Information Center, or CIC. This is designed as a 16-inch powder magazine, but while the ship is under construction, they choose this space inside the armored citadel of the ship down on 4th deck as a location where they're going to basically coordinate all the radar inputs that the ship gets. Ships like New Jersey have multiple different radars: surface search and air search and height finding, radio direction finding, and identification friend or foe, and all these electronic sensors around. So they decided to put them all in one space. That space is CIC. In the 1980s, CIC falls out of use compared to a new space that's added at that time, CEC, the Combat Engagement Center. And that space, located up on the O2 level of the superstructure, is where the missile computers and all the control equipment for those are put. And so most of the command and control abilities were moved up there, except for controlling the 16-inch guns. That remained down in CIC. So from here we can identify radar contacts and determine which one we want to engage using the 16-inch guns, using things like this right here. This is a Mark IV designation indicator, and it basically allows you to use joysticks to designate which targets you want the rangefinders and therefore the guns to aim at. You might have multiple targets showing up on your radars, and well, which one do you prioritize? The Mark IV is a 1950s era addition to the ship, and because major caliber gunnery sort of stops developing after World War II, a better system is not developed, and so this remains in service into the 90s on Iowa-class battleships. Battleship sinks an island. The island in question is Han Mat Island. If you Google it, H-O-N-M-A-T is how it's usually spelled in English, although sometimes it's spelled M-A-T-T. It'll probably come up whichever way you Google it. That is an island off the coast of North Vietnam, pretty high up there in the Gulf of Tonkin, that had shore batteries and anti-air defenses and lookout stations to detect American ships and aircraft coming into North Vietnamese territory so that they could then engage them. So not only is Battleship New Jersey during this time supporting operations in South Vietnam, providing shore battery support and whatnot, she's also operating in North Vietnamese waters and shelling North Vietnamese installations in their own country. This was the original plan for bringing back the battleship, was that she was going to go and participate in the bombardments of North Vietnam, which had been primarily performed by aircraft up to that point. However, the U.S. stopped the strategic bombing campaign of the North for a period of time while the ship was in commission, probably as part of the Paris peace talks. That's usually how it worked. The Vietnamese would say, hey, we're not going to come back to the talks unless you do X. So we do X, and then they come back to the talks, and the talks drag on for years. Anyway, Interesting fun fact, that's also why the crew believes that the ship was decommissioned after only one tour off Vietnam. The story they tell, and I've never seen any documentation to back this up, but they believe it, so it's interesting for that fact alone, even if there isn't any truth to it, and there could very well be truth to it, we just haven't found the documentation yet. They believe that the North Vietnamese refused to come to the peace talks in 1969 unless the battleship is taken off of the firing line, which tells you something about how effective the battleship was. I mean, she does sink an island after all. So, let me read you about the incident from the ship's own command history. During the afternoon of the 14th, again with the A-7s from the America, so these are A-7 Corsair 2s from the aircraft carrier America, doing the spotting, New Jersey fired for 30 minutes at coastal artillery sites on Han Mat Island. The spotter noted one secondary explosion and one battery obliterated. As the debris settled, the spotter reported, and this is in quotes, "You've blown away a large slice of the island. It's down in the ocean." The Han Mat mission was observed by Rear Admiral William J. Moran, Commander Anti-Submarine Warfare Group 3, and Rear Admiral Gerald E. Miller, Commander Carrier Division 3. Following the mission, New Jersey steamed southward to resume operations off the DMZ, the demilitarized zone. So this is part of the ship's command history for 1968, and it is marked confidential, and you can see it was stamped declassified later on. So the museum was able to get this official document, which says this. Because the admirals were on board the ship, there were also reporters on board. So that lends some credence to the idea that this became an article in a newspaper sometime after October 14th of 68. Yeah, so the crew specifically remembers there being reporters on board, and they specifically remember Captain Snyder doing stuff for the reporters, which makes perfect sense. This is very soon after the battleship gets to Vietnam. She only sails from Hawaii in September of 68, so this is within weeks of the ship arriving there. And like I said earlier, she was originally going to be bombarding the north primarily, and then that is not the case. So she does do a couple of bombardment missions up there, but primarily for the rest of the war she ends up in the south. So this is interesting because of that. Now, shore bombardment. We've got some other documentation that talks about October 14th missions. There's a link to that in the description below. But pretty much the National Archives went through gunnery missions that were performed during the Vietnam War and plugged all that information into a spreadsheet. So you can go through and look at all these different gunnery missions. The problem is, it looks like a lot of the information was entered repeatedly, or they didn't update different headings. So that sort of information may well be accurate. Other information, it says that it was an A4 that was doing the spotting instead of an A7. And it generally just has some information logged in there that doesn't match up with this official document, that makes me sort of question what's there. But there's a link to it in the description. You guys can go through it. You can look at all the various shore bombardment missions that they have us listed, and there are well over 50 pages of them in there. So crew members who were on board during this remember first that the press was there. They remember that the first shot did not specifically hit the target, but that the ship continues to fire until the target's obliterated. And that National Archives source that I said I don't necessarily trust, it shows that the ship was, if I remember correctly off the top of my head, firing from a range of about 20,000 yards, which would be about 10 miles, which means that it's not particularly close to the island. So it does make sense that it would be the aircraft flying overhead that says, "Holy cow, you guys just sunk an island." because they're seeing part of this mountainside that had all these caves and trenches and gun batteries dug into it sliding into the ocean. For reinforced targets like that, it would not be unheard of for the battleship to fire armor-piercing projectiles. An armor-piercing 16-inch shell can penetrate more than 30 feet of reinforced concrete. This would be a mountainside, and I'm not quite sure what type of rock this particular mountain is made out of, if it's volcanic, if it's limestone that's relatively soft, or if it's something real hard. I don't know. So it may be more or less than that an AP shell could punch through. Regardless, this document doesn't specifically say. The National Archives document says high capacity, but again, we don't necessarily trust that 100% just because it's not the original document. It's somebody entering things into a spreadsheet that may or may not be accurate. So if it's high capacity, that is still designed to leave a crater about 50 feet wide and 30 feet deep, the size of a good-sized swimming pool. So certainly firing for 30 minutes, if it's 27 rounds like that report says, or if it's more, you could certainly fire more than that in 30 minutes. Then you could certainly blow away a large chunk of that island. So I've received a number of questions about this, and have even seen questions online on forums and things like that that ask about this incident, which is why we're talking about it today. They're often referencing this newspaper article that, again, I've never seen the actual article, but have seen sources that claim it existed. So if you find one, shoot it to me and let me know. But I can say that the incident is reported in the ship's deck logs, that there were reporters on board during the incident, and that it absolutely happens and shows up in multiple official sources. So if you've got more questions about if things that happened during the battleship's career is real or just huge exaggerations like it sounds like sinking an island would be, or if you find a copy of the article and you want to send me a scan, there's a link in the description below to my Facebook page. Head over there. You can talk to me directly on there. YouTube has so many people on here, I can't directly talk to everyone, but we've got significantly fewer people over on the Facebook page. I can usually get back to you within a couple of days at the most. So, interested in hearing what you guys find out, and if there's any other exaggerations about the battleship like that you would like to hear me talk about in the future. One of my mentors here at the Battleship, who taught me how to be a tour guide here, always said, be sure to tell the truth. You don't need to exaggerate it. The ship doesn't require any exaggeration. He had a more eloquent way of saying it, but he had also served on the ship in the 50s. Like I said, the Battleship doesn't need any exaggerations. Whether we sank the island outright or we blew a chunk of the island into the ocean, that's still freaking impressive. So let me know if there's anything you think is exaggerated. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support, and there's a link in the description below if you'd like to continue donating to help the museum. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find out about our channel. Thanks for watching.